But yeah, we'll introduce them as they come in. I'm Representative Hawkins. You guys know me, and you know Senator McKell from the work that we've done over the past couple of years with the Olympic movement. And so we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. We'll do committee introductions a little bit later. Actually, let's have you guys introduce yourselves real quick. So start with Finn, and we'll just go down the row.
Finn Rose with the Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel.
Yes, I'm Alex Yannick. I'm a policy analyst with LRGC, staff in this committee.
Eric Weeks, I'm with OLRGC and counsel for the committee.
Patricia Owen with OLRGC and counsel with the committee as well.
And they won't tell you this, but this is a superb staff that we have here. So they're really humble, but we'll brag for them because they're awesome. So excited to have them their staffing committee for us. So we're going to get into the second item on the agenda. It's the committee overview. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Alex to just kind of talk us through what this is all about. Oh, you have a presentation. Yeah, there we go.
Before I start, where do you want me to go?
Do you want to introduce yourself as you came in?
Was having puppies. It's the first litter, so she's a little unsure what to do. So I apologize for being late.
No worries.
Kara Birkeland, I represent District 4.
Good to have you, Representative Birkeland. Okay, Alex.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just real quick, as this is the first meeting or the inaugural meeting of this committee, we thought we would just do a quick overview on what the purpose of the committee is, what our duties and responsibilities are, and primarily those stem from HB 430, the State Olympic Coordination amendments that was passed by our two chairs here during this last general session. And so that, as part of that, it created the Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games Act, and a big provision in that new act is the creation of this committee, which will meet periodically over the coming years, hopefully in advance of a future Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games here in the state. And kind of the role of the committee will be to advise and to review and advise the legislature on issues related to a potential hosting of a potential future games here in the state. And so we have some of our members here today, but we have this committee made up of 3 senators, 3 House members, bipartisan. There's 2 of each chamber from the majority party and 1 from each chamber in the minority party. As you just met us from staff, Legislative Research and General Counsel will be providing staff for the committee and also consulting with our counterparts in the Fiscal Analyst's Office to provide any fiscal analysis that's needed for the committee. So kind of the primary responsibilities for this committee are going to be to review issues related to the state bid to host, or if we do get awarded a games, items related to hosting of the games, any impacts and financial and economic and securities, other thing like that with the state. We'll come to this committee first and kind of be the lead body for the legislature. And the host committee, what the bill refers to as the host committee, who we're going to hear from today, they will provide a report to this committee twice a year on kind of the status on where things stand in their efforts to obtain the games. And that includes budget information, financial impacts of the games on the state, et cetera. So the committee will have responsibility to review those agreements and make recommendations to the legislature regarding the host agreements. It's important to note, though, that the governor has the ultimate authority to sign on behalf of the state, a host agreement. And there's some provisions laid out in that bill that I mentioned, and you find those in section 63G 28401, kind of what that agreement has to include before the governor can sign it. And then a provision in that bill is that the governor is required to give this committee 72 hours notice prior to executing a host agreement. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what we're here for. You know, over the coming years, there might be a need to meet more frequently, but at least for now, you know, I think we're required to meet twice a year. So this is our first one, and open to any questions if anyone has any.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I appreciate that overview. Something that we're already all familiar with, you know, anyway, so we worked on this together. Senator Escamilla, can we get you to introduce yourself as a member of the committee?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. We're coming from another committee. My name is Luz Escamilla. I'm the Senate Minority Leader and representing Senate District 10, which is the Northwest Quadrant of Salt Lake City, West Valley, and Magna. We have some of those amazing facilities in part of my district, so happy to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next item on our agenda and turn the time over to this illustrious group here at the desk. So if you'll introduce yourself as you speak, then we'll get it on record, and yeah, so. Oh, let me turn your microphones on. There we
There
go.
we go.
That would help. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you, Representative Hawkins and Senator McKell, for your support and leadership during the process and the support of the legislature as a whole. I'd like to introduce our group. My name is Fraser Bullock. I'm President and CEO of Salt Lake City-Utah Committee for the Games. And seated next to me is our chair, Catherine Rainey Norman. And then we have Darren Hughes, who is our bid lead. And then we have Colin Hilton, who is President and CEO of Utah Olympic Legacy Foundation. And we all, most of us are volunteers, so we're doing this because we love the movement. But I will recognize that we're all members of Team 2002 in different capacities. We have one person who was an Olympian, so that's the real deal. The rest of us were behind the scenes trying to make her ice just be absolutely perfect. And there's a story behind that, I'll tell you. But we know Representative Hawkins, you were tied into Team 2002, and Senator Escamilla, and it's like old friends getting back together again to see if we can do another games. So we'll give you an overview. All of us will be speaking during that time, but I want to hearken back to this scene from opening ceremonies. In this moment, Utah was really the center of the world. All eyes were on Utah at this point in time. This was right after we lit the cauldron. We have the rings of fire at the conclusion of opening ceremonies, which was a magical moment. And when I look back to 2002, we all knew we were going to host the games, and we were hopeful that they would be great, but a lot happened. It was a time of healing for the world right after 9/11. So we had an important role on the stage of world history. And we don't know what it's going to be in either 2030 or 2034, but we will have an important role on the world stage, and we'll have the opportunity to fulfill that. In addition to welcoming the world once again in Utah style, as only Utah can do, with the most incredible volunteers you can find anywhere in the world, with our beautiful mountains. And we were recognized around the world as one of the best, if not the best, Winter Games in history. So we're proud of that. But as much as we reflect back on 2002, we're excited about the future. A reimagined games, a new generation of children who can experience the games, 40% more events. And so there'll be very different games, but still with the same purpose of really uniting our community and uniting the world. So with that background, we'll go into this. Here's the agenda we'd like to go through, and We'll go through this pretty quickly. We're going to give you an overview of our committee. Kat will take you through that. A games overview, the IOC process, a calendar, the preferred host submission status, and that's a bid file. Where are we exactly at this point in time? Our vision for the games, what we want to accomplish, the why, the purpose. The games benefits, and part of that is required for this committee to understand the economic impact. Utah's investment in winter sport, the state of sport, which Colin will talk about, and then we'll talk about where we go from here. So with that,
I'm up first. Well, we do want to just, at first, I do want to make sure that we express our thanks and gratitude to you all. It is so vital and critical for us to be able to demonstrate the support at all the different levels of our political structure and within our community. And when we speak to the IOC, this is really an unprecedented measure that they're looking at us from. And so to have unified support is absolutely one of the key table stakes in our effort going forward. So we are extremely grateful and thankful for all of you and your involvement and your trust in our work as we continue to position ourselves. As Fraser shared, I'm going to give you just sort of a quick overview of what our committee looks like. We have a governing board, strategic board, and then our leadership team. It's made up of various individuals from across our community, business leaders, politicians, athletes, etc., really trying to make sure that we can incorporate voices from all the different areas and avenues, and also bring expertise from different areas within our group. We have critical interfaces, obviously, with the International Olympic Committee, the International Paralympic Committee, the USOPC, the various sport federations, which we refer to as international federations or IFs. We love our acronyms in sport, so hopefully over the next several years, you all will also become well-versed in this. And then our community organizations. Again, I think this is an important piece where we have really tried to embrace our different community organizations and hear their voices, understand what excites them about a games, understands their concerns about the games, and move forward in the spirit of partnership and collaboration. That is, again, something that is a little bit different than what other candidatures are potentially trying to seek, but we are very much so trying to incorporate those voices into our effort. And then, of course, the makeup of how we continue to move this effort forward, as Fraser shared, most of us are all volunteers in this effort. We, I think, truly believe in the power of sport and how it can have an impact to do good. And so we are all trying to do this in a volunteer and good faith effort, but we have critical support from the Utah Olympic Legacy Foundation, Utah Sports Commission, again, our community organizations, University of Utah, who will be a vital partner for us. Individuals, people come up to us all the time and say, how can we help volunteer? How can we help support? And then obviously our donors. To date, we have been so fortunate to have philanthropic support for this work going forward, and we're so appreciative of that. I wanted to make sure we gave you a bit of a games overview. This is a really big, complex system, quite honestly. And sometimes it's hard to sort of understand where we fit, but kind of at the top tier, you have the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee. And then outside of that, you have the international sport federations. There are 7 on the winter side. So you think about International Ski Federation, International Speed Skating Union, all of those entities oversee the different sports. You also have the national sport federations, what we refer to as NGBs, national governing bodies. Those are here domestically. They feed up into the IFs. So for example, US Speed Skating, US Ski and Snowboard, USA Bobsled, Skeleton Luge, etc. On the other side of the entities, you also have the National Olympic Committees. So here in the United States, it's obviously the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, but there are 206 National Olympic Committees across the globe that participate in games-related events. And then last but not least, you've got the organizing committees. So these are all the different groups that we're working with. Those listed there are the upcoming Paralympian Games that have already been awarded. We're hopeful that we get to put our logo there soon as well. But there's a lot of collaboration between the different entities in terms of, are there opportunities for cost savings? Can we do knowledge transfer? Is there talent transfer? So there's a lot of engagement that we have with those different entities as well, even at this early phase. So as Fraser mentioned, the games have, they've dramatically changed since 2002. So we have, on the Olympic side, 40% increase in the different events. And that includes new sports that have come online, big air, free ski, and then you go into the team disciplines, right? Mixed team relays, et cetera. And then you look at the Paralympic side, which in my opinion probably has the greatest level of growth still to come, a 60% increase in those events as well since '02. So dramatically larger than what we hosted in '02, and events that appeal to new, younger generations, quite honestly. Oop. By the numbers, this again just kind of gives you a look at the different numbers. I think things to highlight here are obviously the number of athletes that we anticipate having come, 2,900. And then you also have the minutes of coverage. The global coverage of the games is continuing to grow exponentially. On the Paralympic side, you see the number of sport disciplines. I am hopeful that we may see some additional disciplines added in particular here in Utah for our games. But I also want to highlight the number in regards to the audience viewers with NBC and the Paralympic Games.
Can I throw you off just really quick?
Throw me off.
Because you said you want to add games. My understanding is host city gets to add an event. What did we add in the last Olympics, out of curiosity?
Yes, we added women's bobsleigh, and we added skeleton, and I've done skeleton. It's terrifying, but it's awesome.
It's awesome.
And we added some other kind of mixed team events, but those were the two things that we.
And when the Olympics come back to Salt Lake, it better be something amazing.
We're looking for exciting ones. But I do want to highlight again on the Paralympic side the increase in viewership and coverage. Beijing was the first time that Paralympic Games were showed in prime time. This is absolutely critical, and we're seeing in this space the greater interest in an elevation of Paralympic sport when it comes to TV coverage, when it comes to sponsorship, et cetera. There's a dramatic increase in that since '02, and so really excited. I think this is an opportunity for us to truly display Paralympic movement when we host again. So I'm going to throw it over to Fraser to talk a little bit about the IOC process going forward.
So these slides are actually from the IOC, and you go from the top down. So in the green, you have an informal exchange where you just have initial discussions. We did that early on a long time ago. And then you enter what's called a continuous dialogue, which says you're really interested in hosting a future games. And then you become, quote, an interested party. And we became an interested party in November of 2020. And we've been in this continuous dialogue to understand what's best for us, what's best for the Olympic movement. And then the next step for us would be to enter a targeted dialogue when you become designated as, quote, a preferred host, which ideally is edition specific, which means, okay, Salt Lake, we would like to talk to you about 2030 or 2034, one of those two. And this is all overseen by the future host commissions. And there's one for summer and one for winter. And we have met with the Winter Future Host Commission twice, virtually, and had very good discussions with them. So we're working our way down this chart. And as we look at...
Let me ask you a question here. In the yellow, continuous dialogue, what is YOG?
Oh, yes.
Year games?
So those icons, this is Darren. You see the sun, that's summer games.
Yeah.
The snowflake winter games, YOG, Youth Olympic Games.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Good
Thank you.
question.
Yeah.
Which is coming up. So when we look at the Future Host Commission oversees the interest in future games, that continuous dialogue, non-edition specific, they're monitoring us, they're talking with us, And they update periodically the IOC Executive Board. And then the IOC Executive Board gives them feedback, gives feedback to us in terms of next steps. This has been ongoing now for a year and a half, or actually more than 2 years. And we've received really good feedback from the IOC in many, many areas. And then once we enter a targeted dialogue down in the blue with a preferred host, once the IOC does that with us, we hope, then we'll have a submission by us. And that submission, I call it a bid file, but it's really a preferred host submission. And Darren will take you through the elements of that. But we've been working on that for a year and a half. And it's pretty much complete. There are a few lingering pieces, but it's documents, guarantees, thousands of pages, a tremendous amount of work. Then that submission will go to the Future Host Commission, which will then evaluate it. And they may come and visit us. That's an option that they would exercise. And then they'll recommend their position to the executive board, and then the executive board, that green arrow, puts forth its recommendation to the overall session of the IOC. And that's all the roughly 115 members of the IOC, because they're the ones that make the vote. But ultimately, they look at very carefully the recommendation by the IOC executive board. So this is a process. We're familiar with it. We're well into preparing actually our preferred host submission to be ready for targeted dialogue. And we'll look at a calendar in just a moment. But the first thing, a question that people always ask, which is the question, which is it 2030 or 2034? And our answer is yes. We are willing to host either games, whichever is in the best interest of the Olympic and Paralympic movements and Utah. We prefer 2034. The reason for that is hosting games in 2030 would be only 18 months after Los Angeles hosts the Summer Games in 2028. That would create a potential negative impact on domestic sponsorship revenue being that close together. However, we have a budget that does work for 2030 if needed. And so when we look at that, we prefer 34. 30 is a lot of what is being discussed today. What happens if they get a good candidate for 2030 that's not us? And we'll note that Sweden today posted that they're now entering continuous dialogue, that they have enough support to take that next step. And for us, that's good news, because they would fill, potentially, they or somebody else would fill the 2030 slot. Then we could be 2034, but we don't want to have to wait another 4 years to be awarded a bid if we end up with 2034. The IOC has stated that they are exploring the potential opportunity for a dual award of 2030 games and the 2034 games, most likely in 2024. So this would probably be next year. In our ideal scenario, another city would get 2030, we would be awarded 2034, but that's hypothetical at this point, because the IOC has not made a determination around a dual award, but they are discussing it and exploring it. So when we look at the calendar, what does that mean? So in that line across the middle are really the months of the year, and above it are the kind of IOC related calendar items. Below that is our work. So we will continue with our preferred host submission. At the end of this month, we're going to shift gears, and now with it virtually complete, review it with the USOPC to gain their endorsement. The USOPC meets in mid-September. We will be there, and we seek their endorsement of our bid. We're highly confident. They've been involved in it since day one, so we're very confident we'll receive that endorsement. Then the next big set of events is in mid-October, when the executive board meets, the IOC executive board, and then there's an IOC session. So the entire membership gets together. And key topics related to Winter Games that have been stated by the IOC that they will cover are the concern around climate change. How do we address that? They'll also discuss a dual award. And third, they're going to discuss rotational games, which means that there would be a short list of winter hosts that could have the games every X number of years. And so the games could continually come back to Utah. And if that's a discussion we would need to have with you and the legislature and our community leaders and our community in general to say, is this something we would want to do? We believe yes, but we certainly have to have that discussion.
Fraser, could I ask a question there? In October, when the IOC Executive Board meets and when they have the full session, is that a discussion on both Summer Olympics and Winter Olympics, or is that just Winter Olympics?
It's everything.
Okay,
So they discuss all the business associated with the games.
okay,
And what we're hopeful of is that they would authorize a dual award. They wouldn't give a dual award at
Right.
that point in time, but they would authorize that could happen.
Are these the only topics they'll discuss? Or
No,
are these
there's
ones that are, okay.
Days and days
Yeah,
of long list of items.
Okay, all right.
And then in November, the commissions meet, all of the IOC commissions, and the Future Host Commission will meet the week of, sometime in that week of November 16th to 27th. And the potential there is that they will give an update either then or before then. The Future Host Commission would then meet and see if it wants to make any recommendations to the IOC Executive Board at the end of November. So that's the big calendar for this year. It's a very busy fall. We expect to be active and we're excited. Then for next year, we have the YOG, Youth Olympic Games, in January. And then we move to Paris, where the IOC will have, the executive board will meet, and then the IOC will have its session. Now note that typically games are awarded, they have to be awarded by the entire IOC in a session. Now they could call a virtual one at any point in time, but most likely this could be an opportunity for them to award games for both 30 and 34, depending on how everything else lines up. That's one option. There are other options, but that's one that's a possibility. And then there are the games right after that in Paris. Any questions on the calendar?
Yeah, I don't know that it relates to the calendar. Well, maybe it does, but how open are they with the decisions they make? Like, will they, if they decide to do a dual award, will they announce that?
What they will do is, I'll go back to the October dates.
Yeah,
If they authorize a dual award, they'll announce that.
okay,
They always have a media readout, and they'll talk about all the decisions that were made. And they'll talk about what they decided relative to rotational games.
Okay.
My guess is they won't decide to host rotational games. They'll say, no, this makes sense to explore further.
yeah,
But they'll be very open with that. And the same thing in November and 1st of December, they will disclose, for example, if anybody's invited into targeted dialogue,
yeah,
they will announce that. They'll
Okay.
be very transparent.
okay. So we're not gonna be left in the dark
No.
until next summer in Paris?
No,
Okay.
no. We'll
Okay.
know a lot this fall,
Okay,
a lot. I mean, and that's just a few months away.
yeah,
So saddle up, here
well,
we go.
right, yeah, yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'll now turn it to Darren for the preferred host submission status.
Thank you, Fraser, and good afternoon, committee. Thank you. Yes, so we have been working on the bid file, the preferred host submission, the fancy name for it. And it is a series of questions and data that we need to collect, and then a series of contracts and undertakings. So there are 43 questions, and some of them are really simple, like what are the proposed dates of your games? And if it's 2030, it happens to be February 8th through February 24th, just like in 2002 because of the way the calendar works out. And then there are more complicated questions about our game's vision, which we'll cover here in a few minutes. And so we've worked really hard on developing our responses to that. Again, the process that's open right now is for 2030, so the questions we are responding to are for 2030. But all of our other work is for 2030 and 2034. So all of the contracts, all of the guarantee letters, everything is built for both games. In terms of annexes, we have to do a whole bunch of research, a whole bunch of data, everything from travel times from the University of Utah to our other games venues to, weather and water resource data to hotel accommodation data. So we'll show you an example of that work here in a second. We're, again, making really good progress on that. And then the guarantees, again, that's a series of undertakings. Sometimes it's a contract with a venue for, the use of that venue. Sometimes it's a hotel contract. And it's a whole lot of work there. That's where those thousands of pages come in, and we're making really good progress on that as well. So just to show you on the next slide, thank you, Fraser. On the questionnaire, we're about 90% complete. There are a couple of questions that we're still working through, primarily on the sustainability side, to make sure that we really understand the impact of the games and then how we can best use our sustainability ambitions to ensure that we have climate positive games, which we'll talk about a little bit later. On the annexes, we continue to collect data. There's some additional information on, listing roads and advertising spaces and things like that we're continuing to work on. An example of an annex here is the accommodation, this accommodation table. So we have contracted, almost 19,000 rooms, and we go ahead and we make a preliminary assignment of all of those rooms to the potential stakeholders that would come. So we could say that at this hotel, we would likely assign members of the media. Oh, and at this hotel, we would have, National Olympic Committee, officials. And so basically, we've gone through that process with all of the hotels that are participating so far and made that initial allocation. So that's an example of the type of work that we have been spending our time on over the past few months. And then just a quick update on the guarantees. At the federal level, we received one guarantee back, and that's from the FCC. We've had really good conversations with other Biden administration agencies and other officials to make sure that we are rounding up those other guarantees, and we've got terrific support from Senator Romney's office. At the state of Utah level, thanks to your wonderful efforts, we are done. We are ready to go. 100%. And at the local government level, we've worked with the 6 host venue cities and the 4 counties that our games venues sit in, and we have worked with each of the city councils and or mayors and administration to get all of the guarantees and letters of support we need. So we are 100% done there as well, in really good shape. And on that accommodation front, again, we are working our way to 24,000 rooms, which is the required number of rooms for the IOC during the Olympic period, and making good progress there. Okay, thanks.
So one of the things we want to cover is games economics. And over time, we'll talk more and more about this, but at a high level, we wanted to give you a sense for how things work. First of all, no state or local taxpayer funding is required for us to host the games. Very important foundational principle. In fact, the games generate an estimated $64 million in net state and local revenues. So this is a net benefit, economic benefit to the state. Now, where do we get our revenues? Well, number one is from the IOC. They sell media rights and they have worldwide sponsors, and we get a portion of that. Ticket sales and hospitality is actually our biggest revenue source. And then domestic sponsorships as well. Those are our 3 biggest sources of revenue. So these are really privately financed games. The key expenditures that we have, just to give a sense, games operations, massive undertaking. Technology, we have to present all of the data immediately to the entire world, and video imagery and everything else. Labor, at games time, we will have about 50,000 people engaged working at the games. Now, half of those are volunteers, but we have contractors, our staff. It's a big undertaking. And then finally, one of the key expenditures is that we leave behind legacy, we want to permanently endow winter sport in Utah. We left behind a $76 million endowment for the legacy venues, And that has been eroding over time. It was only supposed to last 20 years. And here we are 21 years later, and it's lower. But we want to generate enough profit so that we can permanently endow those facilities and sport events in Utah. So we're very excited about that opportunity. Our vision. This is the why. Now, this will be tweaked over years. Over the years, we'll come up with a tagline and different things like that. But primarily, it is to elevate our communities, sport, and the games experience. And we're going to go through each one of these. When we think about elevating our communities, it starts with our youth. We want to inspire youth with the Olympic and Paralympic values, and we'll show that in a moment. We want to accelerate sustainability, particularly for Winter Games. I mean, the existence of Winter Games is threatened, and so sustainability must be a core part of our mission. And third, we want to increase unity and inclusion. I can remember back in '02, and maybe Representative Hawkins or Senator Escamilla, you can remember how our community just came together and was unified like never before. And that this is an opportunity to do that again, and maybe with more permanence, because we're too divided in our community. We want to come together, and the Games has the power to really do something special there. So if we dive down into the detail, as we think about inspiring our youth, the values of the Olympic movement are excellence, friendship, respect. The Paralympics, determination, equality, inspiration, and courage. We envision going out to schools and having Olympians and different athletes and representatives go out and talk about these Olympic values and Paralympic values and what they can mean to our community. And so there's so much opportunity when you put a Games in place. Accelerate sustainability. We want to be a catalyst to help communities achieve their sustainability objectives. And there are many out there, and we want to say, how can we help? And we're already engaged in that effort. And then increase unity and inclusion. We want to welcome the world together, and that everyone belongs. They really do. When we look at elevating sport, we want to elevate sport for our communities, for Team USA, and for international athletes coming to Utah. So for our communities, Utah really is the state of sport, and we want to expand participation for all abilities with emphasis on our youth. And this is what Colin does every single day, and he's going to talk about that more. Thousands and thousands of kids participating in sport, which is healthy. Not only a healthy lifestyle, it's mentally healthy. And so there are many benefits to that. We also want to help Team USA. We want to deepen our partnership with Team USA to ensure success. Our games are successful if Team USA is successful. Here's a factoid for you. The highest number of medals for Team USA in the Winter Games prior to 2002 was 13 in Nagano. How many did Team USA win in 2002? 34. We blew the doors off. So we want to have a deep partnership with Team USA. It's like if we were our own country, Utah was its own country, I think it would have been 12th on the medals table for the last games. So Utah is a powerhouse in winter sport. We want to continue to cultivate and grow that. And then finally, for international athletes coming to Utah, we want to welcome the world's athletes to train and compete here. Already, athletes from over 30 countries come here to train. And we want to continue to expand that and embrace that and give the Utah welcome to the entire world that if you want to come here and participate in sport and train, Utah's a great spot to do so. Now I'll turn it over to Kat.
So we also want to elevate the Games experience, and that's for the athletes' families, and then for our spectators and other stakeholders. So when you think about the athletes, one of the important pieces that we have for our bid is one village. And quite honestly, we've really gotten away from that within past Games iterations that have been held. Villages are all over There's going to be 5 in Milan Cortina. And so to be able to have one village, to be able to have all of the athletes stay at the University of Utah provides this experience that is different than any other one that they would have at a World Cup or at a World Championships. And I always kind of use the analogy of it's an opportunity to bring everybody home to the same table. When you walk into a village and you walk into the dining hall and you see athletes from across the world there, it's unlike anything that you will experience. And so we have that capability here where we can have athletes all in one home. We can ensure that they have an optimal environment for what they've worked for their entire lives. With the athletes' families, we've worked really closely with many of the athletes that are on our committee, but then also held focus groups across various athlete, stakeholder groups. And the resounding piece of feedback that we get over and over is the greatest burden they face is families. Families don't have access. They don't have access to tickets. They don't have access to affordable housing. They can't get to a games. I'll share that in 2010, Procter & Gamble actually gave every Team USA athlete's mom $3,000 so that they could come to the games. We hosted an athlete forum, and I had an athlete share with me, I went to 3 games, and my parents couldn't afford to come to a single one. We have an opportunity to really try to change this with our games, with trying to work with the University of Utah, and again, create an athlete family village where they can have access to affordable housing, they can have access to tracks, we can help them with tickets. Honestly, when you're an athlete and you make the games, you're told you can have 2 tickets to the games for your parents. But if you don't qualify for the finals, they don't get tickets to the finals. We have an opportunity to change that and really try to make athletes' families and the athlete experience our top priority. And then obviously the last piece is for our spectators and our various stakeholders, and looking at how do we engage them and how do we elevate the experience for everyone, not just here in Utah, but also thinking about this from a national perspective. What changes are happening within technology that we can bring in? How can we help tell the stories of the athletes and help raise the profile of the Olympic and Paralympic movement here in the United States?
So when we think about that,
Let me pause you for just a second. We have a question or comment from Representative Birkeland.
Thank you so much. I have a question. On those tickets for families, is that an IOC standard? Is that the host committee's standard of giving 2 tickets to families? Where does that come from?
You or me?
Go ahead.
Okay. For us, it was always within the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee that we would receive 2 tickets, and I think that came down from the actual organizing committees, if I'm not mistaken here.
Yeah, so we have ultimate control of that we have tremendous latitude. Now, we have a policy, no free tickets, but just the access to buy tickets is the key.
Yeah.
And so we're going to set aside an allocation for athletes' families to be able to buy tickets. And for those who are disadvantaged, we'll have some funding from donors who could help those families who may be struggling.
No, and I appreciate that. I have talked to a few former Olympic athletes who talk about the mental health aspect, and when their families can't be at the games and then they go home from the games, no one cares. Like, oh, you got a gold medal. Like, the fanfare is gone, but your family's there. But if your family couldn't even be there to support you, it really increases some of the mental health struggles that they go through. And so I appreciate hearing that you're going to kind of pick up that slack, and please let me know if there's anything else with the partnerships, because we definitely, I think it's vital for all athletes to have that support.
It's really, one of the things about a games, it can be transformative. This will be a completely new idea for the Olympic and Paralympic movements. And we're so excited about that because it's a core need. The athletes are the heart of the games. And how can we serve them better? Let's look after their families. And I think we're in the most family-friendly state in the world. And here we get that and why that's so important.
No, and I love that you're highlighting that, because it's the families who sacrifice so much to get them to where they are. We have to give back to them some way, and so I really appreciate that you're doing that. Thank you.
And I think this is one of the, again, things that we're so uniquely positioned to do, because we have our venues. As Fraser always says, you know, the O2 games was, are the buses going to run on time? Are the lights going to turn on, right? Like, we're not in that position this go around. So we can be much more thoughtful and purposeful in how we're trying to deliver these games, how we're engaging our athletes in our communities, et cetera, because we're so fortunate to have venues that have been so well kept up and had that engagement that we can think about these programs like athlete families and ensuring accessibility. You know, Lindsay Vaughn shared with us a story that, you know, when she was in Pyeongchang, her mother was in a wheelchair and couldn't get to the event, right? Somebody at the caliber, one of the most notable athletes in the entire world, couldn't have her mother get to the event, right? And so we have this opportunity where we can use the feedback of the athletes. We have a great team that is open to that feedback as well. And how do we enhance that experience?
So when we think about the game's benefits, it starts with our vision, helping the athletes, helping their families, but helping our kids and the communities embrace Olympic values, get out and participate in sport. We have so much opportunity here. It has to be focused, but we can make a really big difference through the build-up and lead into the game. So we welcome your support, your collaboration, and your ideas as we go along.
Yeah. You mentioned, and I really like this idea of one village. So I served my LDS mission in Korea, and the Seoul Olympic Village was in one of the areas that I served in, and it was still there at the time that I was there 25 years ago. But the one village idea is very compelling to me, because it does give athletes an ability to share their experience, you know, with other athletes across the world. The question that I have is, do we have that all scheduled, all planned out? You mentioned the University of Utah. Are we just taking over their Fort
Yeah,
Douglas,
well,
I
that's
guess?
a long story. The
Yeah.
answer is kind of. No, the U was a fabulous partner in 2002, and they're proving so again. In fact, we're right in the middle. Darren and I are right in the middle of those discussions. We're literally mapping out the academic calendar for that year because it is disruptive.
Yeah.
It is going to be disruptive for the U, but they said, including President Randall said, we're all in. We're going to make this work. We know it's disruptive, but this is so important to our community that it'll work.
Yeah.
And we're blessed with this beautiful campus that the athletes are going to be able to stay there, and the Eccles Student Life Center. I mean, just beautiful what our athletes are going to experience. So
Perfect.
the U's great.
Thank you.
So games benefit, I'll turn this over to Darren, but this is one of the things that's required.
Yes, and so obviously that games vision yields a lot of benefits, and the University of Utah has been an awesome partner even now. They have, through the Kem Gardner Policy Institute at the university, worked on 2 different studies with us. The first one is an economic impact projection, and then the second one is looking at the social and environmental aspects of hosting a games and the opportunities around that. So first, just to relay kind of the really top level number, they have projected a $3.9 billion economic impact if we host in 2030. And for those of you who might be observant, the 2002 games, the studies actually came back with just over a $6 billion economic impact. We are more modest in our projection for 2030, and that is because we have all existing venues. So we don't have quite as much economic activity in construction and some of those other areas, but it's still obviously a very positive impact and creates, 30,000 job years of employment and about $1.5 billion in personal income to Utahns. So that's a study that's available. We're happy to share that with you. It's been made public, and it will be part of our preferred host submission. And then just recently, we worked with the Kem Gardner Policy Institute to develop the environmental and social impacts. And so there are a number of tremendous benefits. Fraser already mentioned it a little bit in the game's vision, but we are going to deliver climate positive games. And we're going to, work to be a catalyst for many of these amazing things that are already in our paths, in our host communities and across the state of Utah. So renewable energy, improving air quality, increasing public transportation, and because we rely on tourism, really making tourism sustainable in the state of Utah. And then on the social side, we are really, really excited about the level of impacts that we can have with the games in terms of bringing everyone to the games and really creating a sense of unity from the games. And the Gardner Institute report talks about these different factors, including volunteerism and social cohesion, and improving mental health and physical well-being, and really being able to deliver the next generation of event and sport management and upskilling thousands of people in our communities. And that report, again, we'll make it available to you if you would like to see that.
Well, one of the most unique thing about Utah's past is that there was a lot of terrific thought that went into planning a legacy of a games. And this history and our preparations in the state involved a lot of legislative leaders, a lot of community leaders, a lot of sport and community folks that really shaped a unique history. Back in 1988, the Calgary Games, the Team USA did not have a great performance. If anybody knows the name of George Steinbrenner, used to be the owner of the Yankees. And the U.S. Olympic Committee actually appointed a blue ribbon panel to find out why. And Utah, the key aspects of the report identified that we're sending our athletes to Canada or to Europe to train. And if there was a place in the United States that would put the training facilities and put an emphasis to train our athletes within the U.S., we would get behind that region and look to host an Olympic Winter Games and Paralympic Games in that region. So that created, and again, I think you guys were intrigued to hear a little bit, what was the past support of the state in this effort? Well, in 1989, a referendum statewide overwhelmingly supported tax increment financing to create $59 million to go to initial training facilities at the Utah Winter Sports Park up in Park City, an outdoor speed skating oval in Kearns, and the Ogden Ice Sheet up in Weber County. And those facilities became the beginnings of the momentum of Utah really getting behind its hub of winter sport. 1994, a state resolution identified the powers and purposes of a legacy foundation, and that was memorialized again even before the games were awarded. Games were awarded in 1995, and with a commitment in 2002 that the funding of that $59 million would be paid back to the state of Utah, which it was. And then leaving an endowment, which happened to be $76 million. And so two entities were identified, the Utah Olympic Legacy Foundation and the Utah Sports Commission. One focused on winter sport focused development and the oversight of legacy venues, and the other in the Sports Commission focused on summer and winter sporting events. Our unique approach in running these legacy venues is that we viewed them not just as elite athlete facilities, that they're for our youth, for developing and learning winter sport and using these facilities for community uses. A very inclusive sport philosophy of all ages, all ability levels, and that these facilities, while being official Olympic training sites, are also community recreation centers. And that's actually the bulk of the activity of what they do today. There is what we call a living legacy of these active uses and also how the public engages in activities and are inspired to come to these facilities. Next. A little notable 20-year statistics. We just had that anniversary in February of 2022. We are 100% in use of those O2 venues today. that were used back in '02. Cumulatively, our Legacy Foundation has spent over $234 million to operate those 3 facilities, and kept them up with almost $80 million of capital improvements. All of this was self-funded up until just in 2018, when the state started, through a process we did with the state government. We did a legislative audit. Not many groups will say that was the best thing that ever occurred, to having a legislative audit. But that we came to that with the notion that we could operate and subsidize the running of the facilities, but we were worried about the long-term capital upkeep of these facilities. And we said, we don't believe we have enough funding. And the legislative audit validated that over a course of a 10-year period, that the Legacy Foundation and these facilities should receive some state funding. And that began in 2018. That commitment was over $44 million over a 10-year period from 2018 to 2028. And then over the last 2 years, we've added an additional $62 million to a broader group than not just the legacy venues that my foundation looks after, but also commitments to Provo's Peaks Arena, the Weber County Ice Sheet, the Maverick Center, some of the Salt Lake County ice sheets that we use for practice facilities for hockey. Those are targeted investments to ensure that they are kept up, renovated, and are addressing the everyday needs that the uses are happening with, mostly youth and everyday recreational needs. The Legacy Fund has earned almost $90 million over a 20-year period, averaging about $4.5 million a year. And that legacy endowment that Fraser mentioned was hoped to last 20 years. We've had a goal to try to keep it into perpetuity, but it has been decreasing down to $46 million today. The results of this approach is that we are 4 times busier in how we use these Olympic venues than they were just after the '02 games. It's public uses, it's sport uses, it's community uses. They're ingrained into those communities. And we very much see that this good approach, this good system, creates benefits that we did not even dream of. People feel connected, and I believe in my heart that the reason we're so supportive of the Olympic efforts are that people are seeing or having their kids involved in a program at an Olympic venue, or they're going to an event. They see these benefits, and they're benefiting a broader set of people and not just elite level athletes. And lastly, obviously the Utah is a state of sport. We've had over 1,000 events, summer and winter, in the state, with 250 of those being either World Cups, World Championships, or other international events. And those continue to happen, and we're just so thankful for having these great partners in the state.
So just to wrap up, our next steps are to continue to refine and complete the few remaining gaps in the preferred host submission. We have been working so hard at this for 18 months straight. I mean, a lot of time and effort orchestrated by Darren Hughes. That's been a fabulous experience because we love this work, but we're almost there. We want to then review the preferred host submission with the USOPC for input and to prepare for the September board meeting and the USOPC endorsement. And of course, there are Olympic and Paralympic Day celebrations this month. Now, I will note, just in conclusion, that I remember at the end of our games in '02, so I showed you a slide of opening ceremonies, and then we had closing ceremonies with the biggest fireworks we could buy. We did import them from China. They were like missiles. They were so big, but we wanted to celebrate the great success of the games. And I remember the fireworks going on. And then shortly thereafter, Jean-Claude Keely, an Olympic legend, 3-time gold medalist, commented, he said, "Salt Lake, we will always remember you. these were perfect games. And so we want to do that again and expand our vision, do great things for our community, for our youth, for the athletes. We're excited to do it. We could not do this without your support. And you are the wind at our backs, because when we go out there and we meet all the time with people in the Olympic and Paralympic movements, we know that you are behind us. And that makes such a big difference, so thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. You have our support. Thank you for your presentation. Fraser, thank you. Catherine, thank you. Darren, thank you. Colin, thank you. I think that was a very well done presentation. My takeaway is we are ready, we're on schedule, and you've got solid support here in the state of Utah, both from the executive branch and the legislature and the public. And I think that cannot be understated. Are there any questions from committee members? I don't see any questions. So where do we go from here is the question. We're going to track your progress. Obviously, bringing the Olympics it's a huge commitment for the state of Utah, and it's a commitment we're excited to make. And I appreciated your timeline. I think the timeline, I'm glad we had some press here to look at that timeline. People always ask me, what does the timeline look like? What is our group in Utah? What is our team doing? I think the information you presented today was very, very helpful. So with that, we're going to follow the timeline. We'll schedule another meeting as it goes a little further, and obviously reach out to us as you need support. That's why we're here. We do support you, and we appreciate the presentation. Before I take a motion to adjourn, is there anything else from any members of the committee? Anything else we want to add? Okay, I don't see any other questions or concerns. I really appreciate you being here today. This is exciting. This is something to be celebrated with our first historic meeting. Representative Birkeland, I'm going to turn your light for one final motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, that motion is not debatable. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'll rule that passes unanimously. We are adjourned.